Welcome to The Conversation. I am Ron Gray, host of Conversations That Matter, where we talk about social change and public policy issues. We are just a few short weeks away from Election Day here in Kentucky. There's a special election coming up on Election Day for the next circuit judge in my hometown of Lexington. Both candidates agreed to sit down and talk with me about the job and why they are the best candidate. My guest today is Judge Julie Goodman. Judge Goodman has been a judge in district court for 11 years after a long and expansive career in law. Let's jump right in and get to know Judge Goodman. Thanks for joining the conversation. Welcome to Conversations That Matter. I am Ron Gray, and today I'm joined by Judge Julie Goodman. Thank you for sitting down with me.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure.
This is an important season for you, and I wanted to have you and your race opponent down and talk about the circuit court. And you were running for circuit judge of the 4th Division.
4th Division.
Yeah,
yes.
Here in Lexington.
Yes.
I thought it very important for people to get to know who you are. And I think sometimes the judicial elections get overlooked and we don't get to know the candidates very well. So I wanted to have a conversation and give people a chance to get to know who you are and talk about some important issues. So thanks for joining me.
Well, thank you for having me. You're right. People don't seem to think that it matters because they think they'll never be there. But the judicial system and our legal system is extremely important.
Yeah. Even if you're not there, it is. There's some indirect impact, right?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
It affects our lives every day.
Yeah,
every day.
Well, tell us about you first before we get into the whole court conversation. Tell us who you are, where you're from. Tell us about your family, your work life. I know off camera we were talking about Transy a little bit, so it sounds like you have big roots here.
I do. Actually, I'm a native of Lexington. I was born here. I actually grew up on the family farm, the same farm my dad grew up on 8th and Boonesboro. I'm one of 5 children. I'm also a product of the school system here in Lexington. Went to Christ the King, then to Tates Creek High School. Got a scholarship to go to Transylvania. Graduated with a BA in English. Went on to UK Law School. So I am truly a product of our educational system here in Lexington and a big proponent of our educational systems. I have, as I said, lived here my whole life, other than 3 years when we lived in New York City so my husband could work at Sloan Kettering. I have one son, 26, Clay Goodman, who chose to go to Charlotte, North Carolina for college to get 5 hours away from mom and dad rather than 15 minutes away from mom and dad. He still resides there. My husband works at Sloan Kettering. He worked at Sloan Kettering, but now he's back and he works at the VA, specializing in post-traumatic stress. And I have been your district court judge for 11 years. A lot of people don't realize that, which is a good sign because if you don't know about district court, or don't know me, that means you're not in district court,
right?
Which is always good for people. I think people try to stay as far away from the court systems as they can, which is fine. Prior to taking the bench 11 years ago, I actually was a national litigator. I have tried cases in 24 states. All of them were in circuit court. I specialized in product liability, construction defect, antitrust, class actions. So they were complex litigation cases. Loved what I did. I've always loved the courtroom. From day one, I knew I wanted to be a trial lawyer. And I've been fortunate to have always been a trial lawyer. I will tell you, when I graduated from law school, none of the women in my class could get jobs in law firms. Women weren't seen as a fit in the legal profession. We were the new ones that came out and sort of broke that glass ceiling. And so, fortunately for me, Ray Larson, believe it or not, was an advocate of women trial lawyers and gave me my first job as a special prosecutor at the Attorney General's office under Steve Beshear, who was the Attorney General at that time. I tried cases in over 20 counties, capital murder cases. I helped write the handbook on handling a death penalty case. After I did that, I went into private practice. But I'll never forget, when I decided I wanted to be a trial lawyer, one of the senior attorneys here in Lexington, who was a family friend, said that women didn't belong in the courtroom. And I often think if I had done what he wanted me to do rather than what I wanted to do, I wouldn't be sitting here asking people to vote for me for,
You'd be in a different place.
for circuit judge.
Yeah.
And
Well, you clearly have proven him wrong.
Well, thank you for that. But I love what I do. I always have. And after I did special prosecutions, I went into private practice. I've been a partner at 3 excellent law firms here in town. I also did a little bit of criminal defense work. And along with my co-counsel, we were the first to convince a judge here in Fayette County. We had a woman who had killed her husband. She had been abused throughout the entire marriage, Margaret Ford. And we defended her, and we were the first to convince a judge here in Fayette County to let us use the battered spouse syndrome as a defense. And as a result, we are fortunate enough to save her from a murder conviction.
Wow.
Yes. So I've had a very diverse career. I've been very lucky that way, and I think that helped me when I took the bench as district judge to be able to navigate all the different parts of the law that district judges deal with.
Well, that's a good segue into a topic about district versus circuit. Tell us the difference, because we were talking earlier, if I ask a dozen folks the difference, my guess is most might not know.
That's true.
And it's okay on some level, but what is the big difference between district and circuit?
District is a very diverse court. It is a court of limited jurisdiction in that district court only handles certain things, but we handle many more areas than, say, circuit does. All probate matters, and that's why truly district court is the court of the people. If most people are going to be in court, they'll be in district court. If you have a probate matter, you lose a family member and you have to probate the will, or you have a trust situation, that is all district court. We have total jurisdiction over that. We also handle all juvenile criminal matters. So any young people that end up in trouble in a criminal setting that are juveniles end up with us. That is our jurisdiction. We handle all forcible detainers, people that have to be evicted. We handle all small claims court cases. We handle all civil cases under $5,000. And every single criminal case that ever occurs in Fayette County starts in district court.
That is a broad range of...
It is a broad range.
Yeah.
In fact, you can't, if we have preliminary hearings in situations where it's a felony, and if in that situation we find probable cause, then it will go to the grand jury. We have that. We're the gatekeepers to decide if it's really a felony and should go on up to circuit. We keep all misdemeanors in our jurisdiction. District judges, for the last 11 years, I've been on call every 5 nights. So we handle all search warrants, all mental health petitions, and all juvenile bonds. And we set all bonds for everybody when they first get arrested. So every 5th night, I'm on call along with the other district judges. We take our turns.
Are there 5 of you guys?
There are 5 of us. And we also do a mental health court. If someone has to be involuntarily committed, we have to do that if there's a mental health issue. Or if someone through an illness or a car wreck or a stroke has a situation where they're no longer, they're disabled, we handle those matters and find after a hearing or a jury trial whether or not they should be deemed disabled and have a conservator and a guardian. So that's what district court does.
Quite complex.
It is.
So important, yeah.
It is, and people don't realize that.
Yeah.
But it is the most diverse
such
court.
an eclectic, diverse
it is. And
group of issues,
you have to know all of that. The other thing is, and I've lived here all my life, other than those few years in New York, and I truly didn't get to know my community as much as I thought I did until I took the bench in district court. That is where you truly, truly see your real community.
Yeah, the heartbeat of who we are.
Absolutely, and that's been a great gift to me.
Is circuit and even, district and even circuit, for your jurisdiction, is it only Fayette County?
It is only Fayette County. In fact, in district court, because we're actually 1 judge short and have been ever since I've been on the bench because of resources, we have the largest dockets for district judges in all of the state. Wow. So Fayette County's a pretty big area.
Is there much of a backlog?
We don't have backlogs
no,
in district court. You can't afford to.
You have to address it.
You have to address it. For example, last week I do my felonies and misdemeanor cases in the morning on Thursdays, and I had 42 felonies and 122 misdemeanors.
What?
And if you don't handle your docket and move your docket, it doesn't you're not allowed to have a backlog.
Oh my God.
We have too large of a volume of cases.
So this is me not being very informed. Do you have law clerks or assistants?
District judges do not have law clerks or assistants.
What?
District courts, we do it all on our own. Yeah.
Do you even have a secretary?
We have two wonderful secretaries who we share,
for
who all five of us share, and we have a court administrator who keeps us all on track. Yeah, that's it.
Wow.
It's a pretty impressive situation because everybody knows what they have to do and everybody does it. And if they didn't, I can't imagine.
Right,
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
So the experience is vital.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, tell us why you want to go from district to circuit, because this race is for circuit court.
Absolutely.
And tell us a little bit about what circuit court is in contrast to district and why you want to move into that
Circuit
space.
Is just the next step in the sense that the felony cases that I handle in district and determine whether there's probable cause to send them up, they end up in circuit court. So they're the felony cases.
Okay.
They will stay there. That's the criminal docket that they handle. Circuit are any civil cases 5,000 and above.
Okay.
That's
Are they
much it.
always, is there always a jury involved?
You can always waive a jury trial if you
Okay.
choose to. In a criminal case, most people would not do that. You know, that is one of the cornerstones of our legal system. In fact, it was so important that not only is in our Constitution, it's in our Declaration of Independence, and it is also alluded to in our 10 First Amendments, our Bill of Rights. So a jury trial is extremely important, both in circuit and district.
Okay.
Yeah. So
What makes you the best candidate?
my
Such a broad question, right?
well, I think it is my experience. I don't think that anyone has the kind of experience I've had, or the other candidate has the kind of experience I've had, both in civil and in criminal. Additionally, I've had the 11 years on the bench.
Right.
My community has elected me for 11 years. I think the best judges in circuit court are the ones that started in district because they learned how to be a judge there. And I think without that experience, you don't know your community and you don't see the whole picture. And I think that that's very important. And frankly, I wouldn't ask for the position. I wouldn't ask people to vote for me if I didn't think I'd earned it. I think you have to earn it. I don't think any of us are entitled to it.
Right, right. How long are the terms?
For circuit, for district, it's 4 years.
Okay.
For circuit, it's 8 years.
Oh, wow. Okay, okay. And are there 5 judges on circuit court as well?
Well, circuit court's divided up because, there's circuit judges who are simply family court judges, and all they do is divorce or family court.
Okay.
And then there's circuit judges who do, as I've described, the criminal and the civil other aspects.
Okay.
So they're divided up.
Do you know what this seat would?
This seat is strictly circuit for civil and criminal. It's not family court.
Okay.
This is replacing Judge Pamela Goodwine, who won for the Court of Appeals.
Right.
This is a special race to fill her spot.
Yeah, yeah. So the election will be on November 5th when we elect our next governor and lieutenant governor.
Exactly.
So everybody should do their homework and be prepared. It's always at the bottom of the docket too, isn't it?
It is always, and it is a nonpartisan position. So you have to go all the way through everybody else, and then at the very end are always the judges.
So even if you're a one-party ticket voter, which is fine if that's what people choose, remember that does not cast your vote for the next circuit judge. You have to go to the bottom, and in addition to your one-party ticket, you have to choose.
That's exactly right.
And there are only 2 candidates.
Yes.
In May, there were 5.
There were 5, and then the top two.
Yes,
I was number 1, and the other was number 2. And yes, so now it's between the 2 of us.
You carried a lot of votes in May.
I did. I was lucky. I got 55% of the vote. I was very, very fortunate.
Yeah. Well, congratulations.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, let's get into a little bit of some issues that are important to you, some things that you see in district court, and also you'll see in circuit, I'm sure, at some level. I know drug court is important to you.
Yes.
And tell the listeners what drug court is, what kind of jurisdiction you have over a defendant, and what are the benefits of it?
All right. Well, drug court has actually been around for quite some time. I think probably we're maybe in our 25th year, not necessarily in Kentucky, but in the United States, because there are lots of people that end up in our court system who aren't criminals. But because of their drug addiction, they end up, or even their alcohol addiction, they end up committing a crime. And let's not forget that just possession of a drug in our state is a crime. So it may be that they're arrested on a possession of a heroin or possession of cocaine, but they've not committed any other crime. They have jobs, they have families. Those people don't belong in the penitentiary. We need to help them address their addiction, and our communities and our country realized that long ago. So there are a group of us, there are 4 judges who handle specialty drug courts. Now that
in the district court?
I have one in district court, the others are in circuit.
Okay.
There are 3 other judges, Judge Messer, Judge Goodwine had done one, but now hers has been taken over by Judge Messer. Judge Breslin does one, Judge Bunnell does one, and I do one.
Okay.
And we all do specialty drug courts. Now the person, if they're charged with possession of heroin, for example, most of the individuals in my court are heroin, have heroin addictions. If they're charged with that, then they have to plead guilty. They get a sentence of a year in the penitentiary, or a year in jail, because they're in district court.
In county jail.
In the county jail.
Okay.
But they're put on probation for a period of 2 years or longer to complete drug court.
Okay.
And if they complete the drug court program, then the charge is dismissed and expunged.
Okay.
But the drug court program is not an easy program. There is constant drug testing. They have to have jobs. They have to do counseling. They have to have, but we try to help the whole person. You know, and so many of these people, they don't have any, they don't have physicals. That we make them get physicals. We make them learn to take care of themselves and to be productive members of the community. But you also need to realize that so many of these people are already productive members. I've had a nurse. I've had a professional ball player as one of my participants. I've had an engineer. These are phenomenally good people who just made a mistake and got addicted to a drug. And they are the people in our program are extremely successful. I'm not saying we have 100% success rate. We don't. And we have tragedies and we have sadness and we lose people. We lose them to overdoses. I mean, it's not perfect, but they're not criminals.
Right.
And they don't belong in our criminal system.
When do you think the idea of addiction shifted to more of a clinical problem versus a social problem? Because we're seeing more and more people are accepting the idea that addiction is or drug abuse is an addiction, not just a social choice, but a real chemical. There's a real chemical component there.
Right.
Have you seen that in the court system very long, or is that sort of a new idea that people are finally accepting?
I think that the court systems, in all honesty, it's funny. A couple of years ago, well, and I commend Mayor Gordon. She is absolutely feels that we need to address the addiction in our communities. But the court systems realized it a long time ago. We realized that it was not a crime. We also realized that it was not social. It was not they're just lazy bad people.
Right.
But it's a chemical. Some people are more addicted to things than others.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like alcoholism.
Yeah.
We addressed that and knew it a long time ago. We just went about our business of trying to help and fix it. I'm thrilled now that our community is becoming very open about it. And actually, I was with Andrea James, who is the liaison with Mayor Gordon, to deal with the addictions we have here in Fayette County. But I think the court system has known it a long time. I just don't think the community's noticed.
Another reason why it's so important to have these types of conversations so that the idea of this is introduced and more people talk about it.
Exactly.
Because like you said, it's not only affecting let's say, for example, the homeless or the poorest among us. There's no there's no limit to the people that are affected. I mean, you could be a wealthy professional and still be taken down by these monsters.
Oh, absolutely. It happens all the time. And I think, sadly, I think in our country that sometimes happens. It reminds me very much of HIV.
Mm-hmm.
When it was perceived as a gay issue,
mm-hmm.
no one seemed to care.
Mm-hmm.
But when it started affecting others because of it was spreading into the other communities,
mm-hmm.
that's when somebody stepped up to the plate.
Yeah. I remember the day we all learned that Magic Johnson was diagnosed. Standing at a copier at my job then and thinking, wow, this is going to really shift the conversation.
And it did. It's the same thing. You know, when you have people who have the resources and have some power,
mm-hmm.
have it affect them, then all of a sudden it becomes an issue.
Yeah.
And we address it.
Unfortunate, but at least there's some traction that takes place when those things happen.
And we do have traction now.
Yeah, good.
And I'm thrilled.
Good.
I'm thrilled.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the cost factor. When you look at, for example, if someone that's convicted of a heroin possession charge and they the typical sentence is 1 year in
mm-hmm.
county jail.
Mm-hmm.
If they participate in drug court, do they still go to jail, or do they get that probated and they participate in the program?
They participate in the program. Now, that's not to say that if they violate during it and they have the courts, the jail can be used as sanctions.
Okay.
We try not to, but
mm-hmm.
yes, they
mm-hmm.
might go in for 2 weeks or
mm-hmm.
something. We use that to somewhat as that's always the thing that's saying to pull them back.
Yeah.
But it saves so much money because we don't fill our as a judge in district court for the last 11 years, I will tell you that we would have a lot of beds available if we didn't use our jails to house our homeless,
mm-hmm.
our mentally ill,
mm-hmm.
and our people addicted to drugs and alcohol. If we just put in our criminals, we'd have a lot of beds available.
And if we rerouted
the resources,
that, and it's probably a bit more expensive, I don't know, I'm guessing, to house folks in county jail than to build these community programs that could address.
Oh, absolutely.
And I think Lexington has done a great job addressing the homelessness issue.
I think we're,
and addressing the mental health issue. I think we're a little bit behind there, but most of the country is. But if we rerouted those resources, and hopefully, because we're building traction here, that will follow.
Well, and I will tell you, at least at the district court level, that the district judges have a wonderful relationship with Eastern State, where
mm-hmm.
our mentally ill are taken on a regular basis. In fact, Dr. Asher is one of the individuals at Eastern State, and she's on my cell phone, and I'm on her cell phone.
Great.
Because we deal so much with the mentally ill.
Mm-hmm.
And our goal is to get them out of the cycle.
Mm-hmm.
We know them on a first-name basis.
Mm-hmm.
They know the judges on a first-name basis. And so our goal is always to try to get them the resources they need and get them out of the jails
mm-hmm.
and out of our court system and into the sober living places
mm-hmm.
or the homes for the mentally ill that we can help train them.
It's not only the cost savings, but also the chance for folks to live a more full life.
A productive life, absolutely.
Before we move on to a different topic, I recently read that Louisville is decriminalizing small amounts of marijuana. How does that process work? Is that a city council jurisdiction, or are the courts in charge of making those decisions?
The legislature creates the laws. Now,
how can Louisville override state legislatures?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
Other than, I will tell you, I think what people don't realize is there are lots of laws probably on the books,
mm-hmm.
and I'm not just saying criminal, but
mm-hmm.
civil laws or anything, that just never get enforced.
Yeah. So maybe not decriminalizing is not the right word, but
it's more of a policy that if someone's picked up by the police and mm-hmm. they have, one joint in the car,
Right.
they might say, well, we're not going to charge them.
Okay.
We're
so
just...
is it a police decision or is it a judge decision?
I think it's never a judge decision,
Okay.
because by the time we get to it or we know about it, it's already been charged.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, gotcha.
But
So it's a policing decision.
It's more probably of a policing decision, and it's like, and you'll see that with them. There might have been. You'll even read a search warrant. There may have been a small amount of marijuana in the car, or not marijuana in the sense like it's trafficking, but
Right.
just like obviously they've been
Recreational
smoked.
use.
Yes,
Yeah.
recreation. But they didn't charge them with that. They charged them with the DUI because they were also they look at the lesser of the two evils,
Yeah.
and But I think the police have always, to some degree, been doing that, and we've had on the books forever.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, as long as I've been in practicing law, if you have a first offense, possession of marijuana, even if you plead guilty to it, you can have it. Once you've paid your fine and court costs, you can actually have it voided.
Okay.
That's been on the books by the legislatures forever.
Okay.
So that's already there.
Mm-hmm. Do you see those expungement cases?
Yes.
As long as they fall under your jurisdiction?
Yes, we get
district
those.
Court.
District courts get
Yeah.
those all the time.
Yeah.
All the time.
Do you see a lot of recreational marijuana use in your court?
I don't see that as much, and I think probably because that's not the focus of there are bigger issues
Yeah.
out there for the police.
Yeah.
I would say primarily the drug that I see that comes forward on my dockets on a weekly basis, and for all of us in district court on a daily basis, are cocaine, heroin, and meth.
Wow.
And they are rampant in our community.
Yeah.
Rampant. That is probably the majority, to some degree, of the cause of all our crimes.
Mm-hmm. How do we stop it?
That's a good question.
Is it above our pay grades?
No, I don't think it is. I think everybody has to be involved in fixing it. And I think first and foremost, we stop it by having conversations that matter.
Yeah.
That we talk about what is facing our community, and we don't ignore it.
Mm-hmm.
And what that takes is a lot of conversation, a lot of talking, because it has to be the people in power, the people that help run our city and run our states and run our counties that help address it and fund the money where it needs to go.
You said something earlier when we were talking about your husband. He's a very empathetic human being.
He is.
And he, to be in the role he's in with veterans and helping those men and women cope with the horrors that they have experienced. I feel like the more conversation we have, the more empathy we allow in the conversation.
Oh, I agree. Yeah.
And it's not giving folks a pass. It's being human and realizing that we all make mistakes.
Oh.
And a second and third chance is sometimes all people need.
Oh, absolutely. And frankly, if there are, I know people might say, well, she seems so, easy on crime. Well, I'm an ex-prosecutor. I'm not easy on crime. If someone, but what I will tell you is in my years in district court, probably a good percentage of the people that come before me, probably a good 70%, maybe more, are good people who have just made mistakes.
Right.
But now, are there truly evil people out there? Absolutely. There are truly evil people in this community, and those people deserve the consequences they get. As I said, I've prosecuted. I mean, I know there are people that deserve to not be free, to have their freedoms taken away. And I'm all about that as well.
Yeah.
You can't have been an ex-prosecutor and not feel that way. But at the same time, I know that nothing is black and white in this world.
Yeah.
It's all gray.
Well, I would suggest that your experience has fully equipped you to sit on either bench.
Oh, well, thank you for that.
So,
thank you.
Let's talk about we've all these things sort of intersect, don't they? Criminal justice, and I know as a judge there are certain things that you can talk about, certain things you can't have an opinion on, etc. But there's a lot of conversation in circles that I'm a part of about racial disparities among policing, convictions, sentencing, etc. There's a lot of research out there about prison populations and how heavily weighted we see African Americans imprisoned versus white Americans, and Hispanics are a higher number too, not as high as African Americans. But what can you speak to as far as that racial disparity and how we have come to this point and how we combat it? And do you see it in the court system? What are your thoughts around that?
Well, I think it is, if you came and sat in the court system and watched, especially in district court, for any period of time, you would see that seems to be a disparity.
Mm-hmm.
I see it mostly in my juvenile dockets.
Mm-hmm.
The ones that come before me the most are the young African American men.
Mm-hmm.
I think that it's totally related to the fact that so many of those young men in our community grow up in poverty. They grow up without the support that others have. We have an educational system that is underfunded.
Mm-hmm.
There are not the resources that help these children. And the other thing that I think has affected, that leads from the school to the prison, is we are using medications.
Mm-hmm.
There are so many of the young men and women who come before me in juvenile court that'll be 13, 14, and they will have made a bad decision. And and some of it is immaturity, but then the other, I realize they've been on medication since they were 2 because somebody's diagnosed him with ADHD at 2.
Mm-hmm.
Well, being the mother of a 26-year-old young man who was,
Right.
what
A feisty little 2-year-old, aren't we all, right?
What little boy isn't ADHD at 2? So in that sense, I think that because we didn't have the resources in the school systems to help deal with these things, or they didn't have the support at home because they didn't have a large family support system, that the answer was, well, just medicate them.
Mm-hmm.
So we medicate them. Well, how does your brain ever develop properly if you've been on a chemical since you were 2? So all of these come together. It's like the perfect storm. They have no resources. They grow up in poverty. They look at it and they think, well, what do I have to lose? And those, I think, all come together, and then we end up that it does seem to be that there is a much larger number of our young black people of color that end up in our court system. And I think it's totally related to the poverty and to the lack of education.
So this is a difficult conversation to have, and maybe one that we can't discuss because you're a judicial candidate, but I recently watched an interview with Rand Paul, one of our U.S. senators from Kentucky, and he suggested that there is heavier policing done in African-American communities versus non-African-American communities, and that's why we see such a higher percentage of people of color going through the court system and imprisoned. I know that's not an easy conversation to have and not one that a lot of people may agree with, but it came from a Republican U.S. senator. So I'm wondering, you're so involved in the community, does the African-American community feel that, or do you believe it is an issue is it reality, or?
I think, I will tell you that when I lived in Manhattan, it was very much a reality. Now, I don't know that I see it that much in our community in Fayette County. I work with the police every day. As I told you, every 5th night I'm on call.
Yeah.
And
You're hearing from them.
Yeah, and I don't think our police force targets or tends to police that community more than it does any. I just don't think that's how they operate here. And we've been very fortunate in that we've had police chiefs of color. We have one now. So I don't think that's as big an issue here. I'm not saying it isn't one somewhere.
Of course.
And in other places. And I do think there's been those issues in larger cities, but I don't think it's here.
How do you think community policing, and for those that don't understand what community policing is, maybe you can speak to that. From what I can understand, it has really benefited the relationships between the policing community, that encompasses a large number of agencies, and communities, not just in African American communities, but in communities abroad. I'm a big proponent of that. I think it's healthy, and I think it builds relationships and it builds trust. Speak to that. And I believe we have a good community policing system here.
Oh, I think we've got a great system here. I think that, first of all, I think our police, first and foremost, get the credit because they absolutely do go out into the community, and they have created a group that do nothing but that.
Okay.
They walk the streets like in the old days.
Yeah.
They're absolutely involved in their communities. They work with their communities. I also think that our judges work well with our police and with our communities, and we all work together on a regular basis. But it's not just the police and the judges and the prosecutors and the defense attorneys, it's the whole community. Everybody's involved. We have events together. All of the organizations that are out there that are working with our children, you know, all of the drug groups, everybody, we work together on a regular basis as a team.
You know, I'm from the healthcare world. And in my first life, I was an emergency room nurse.
Oh, gosh.
And
that's a tough job.
Yeah, it was tough, but I loved it when I did it. One of the biggest breakdowns I've seen from a patient perspective, or my mom was ill and we lost her about 2 years ago, but when she was, thank you, when she was going through the last 3, 4, 5 years of her life in and out of hospitals, the biggest constraint from an outsider looking in was the lack of collaboration between the entire healthcare community, the entire healthcare team. And I know how important that is from the healthcare arena. So mirror it with policing and court system, et cetera. It will either build a community or tear it down, right?
It will, and I think that fortunately for us in Lexington and Fayette County, we do talk. We tend to, when we have issues with the police, we have meetings. When we have issues with the public defenders, we have meetings. And with the prosecutors, the same thing. We communicate on a regular basis. As I told you, I have a great relationship with Eastern State. I mean, there's probably very few people that can say that they've got the judge's cell phone number.
Right.
And I get the calls from Dr. Asher if there's an issue. And I call her if I've got somebody that comes in my court. And that's what it takes. You know, it takes that type of working together to fix things. And as long as we communicate, as long as we talk about the things, as long as we bring them to the light, there's always the potential to fix them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Bringing them to light is the first step.
Absolutely.
Having conversations.
Is the second step. Yes.
Well, I know you have a busy day, but I want to ask a couple more questions.
That's fine.
What do you love most about Lexington?
What do I love most about Lexington?
Because you're part of this community.
I am. I love this
community. Your roots are here.
Yeah.
And
I love it.
This community knows who you are. What do you love most about it?
I love that we have a small town feel, but yet at the same time we're always growing, and the university, I think, helps that. The culture helps it. New people always moving in. So and we're always changing. Lexington, and I think it's because of the universities that we have here, Transylvania, which of course is my alma mater, which I always have to talk about because I found my voice at Transy. Right. So but I think that helps, but we still keep that very small town feel. And I think one thing about Lexington is people care about each other here. We have phenomenal, we have the group that NAMI that helped create our mental health court. We have a veterans court that our community reaches out and tries to help our veterans. I mean, we are an extremely caring community. And even when the court systems or the police or our medical fail or drop the ball on something, there's always a group of people in this community that pick it up and run with it.
That's great.
Yeah.
I grew up in Winchester, down at Boonesboro, just a few miles from where you live now.
Yeah.
Just take Athens Boonesboro down.
Yeah, you
across
just
the
passed
river.
my house. Yeah.
But I've lived here since college, and I see that too. And I love it's not too big, but it's not so small that everybody knows your business.
That's right.
But
That's right.
it's not too big that there's a sense of community here.
Yeah.
And you can really become engaged in whatever you're interested in.
Mm-hmm.
I became more and more engaged in public policy making about 2 years ago, and it's a very inviting community when you connect with folks who have like interest, and I think it's a great place to live and great place to raise kids too.
Me too.
Yeah. What do you think are our biggest challenges moving forward?
I think our biggest challenges, and I see it from the work I do, is I think that we need to address our educational system. I think it's a phenomenal system, but I think we aren't putting enough resources into it. And as a result, I think our children are losing out, and they're the next generation of who our leaders will be.
Yeah.
And if we don't educate them, then our country as a whole will suffer. I think that's a country. I don't think it's just a Lexington or Fayette County issue. I think it's an issue for our whole country. And I think that's one spot that we really, really need to work towards. And I think we have to acknowledge that poverty creates a lot of our problems. And unless we address it, they'll just get worse.
Right.
And I think that the district judges see that more than anybody. Yeah, and we see it on a daily basis.
Yeah, you see the breakdowns of both.
We do.
Lack of education.
Lack of education, the poverty, because that allows people to, I think they have no hope. And therefore, if you have no hope, there's nothing that prevents you from making those mistakes, those bad mistakes that affect your life and the life of others.
Right.
Tragically.
Well, how can folks connect with you or learn more about you? Do you have a website?
I have a
social
website.
Media?
I have social media. I'm on Facebook.
Okay.
It's my first experience with Facebook, so
I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. Yeah. That's my disclaimer. So, but you can get on Facebook. I'm on Facebook. I have a website.
What's your website?
I knew you'd ask me.
I
think it's
we'll find out.
I think it's judgeJulieGoodman.com or something to that
I tell you
effect.
what, folks can Google Judge
Julie
Goodman,
Goodman, and you'll find me. And then Facebook, it's just Judge Julie Goodman. You can find me on Facebook. I think I'm on Instagram, and I'm on Twitter.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm on all of them.
You sound like me.
Yeah.
I'm on all three of them, but I can't keep up.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
Well, thank you for sharing your story, who you are, and your perspective on things. We've just got a few more weeks before the election.
That's right.
On November 5th. So if folks connect with Judge Julie Goodman, go to the bottom of the ballot.
That's right.
If you're a one-party voter, that's okay. But remember, you got to go to the bottom of the ticket to find your judicial choice.
That's right. And I hope they vote for me on November 5th.
Well, thank you.
I'd appreciate it. Thank you very much for the day.
Thanks.
This is great.
Thanks for joining my conversation with Judge Julie Goodman. You can learn more about Julie at www.judgejuliegoodman.com. And don't forget, Election Day is just a few weeks away on November 5th. Be sure to know your polling place and be part of democracy.